A lot of Asian Americans talk about how they can't identify as either Asian or American, but I couldn't really identify as Asian American or Asian American because all of the Asian Americans that were surrounding me were Chinese American. Hello, what is up internet people? Today I have a very special video to share with you guys, and that is the growing up as an Asian American tag. This tag was created by Vagabond youth. So obviously I'm going to be speaking about myself today, which is a Vietnamese American, which is different from her video, which is about being Korean American. And I haven't seen any videos like this so far about being Vietnamese American, so if you do know any other videos that are similar, let me know so I can check it out. So question number 1 is, what ethnicity are you? I am Vietnamese American. Question number 2, which generation are you? So my parents immigrated here from Vietnam, so I'm the first generation born here. What is the first experience of where you felt that demarcation of being a minority or different? So this question I have a really long answer to because it's kind of two parts. The part of me that realized that I was Asian, which is different from being white, and the part of me that realized that I was Vietnamese, which is different from being any other type of Asian. As soon as I entered kindergarten, I realized that I was a different type of Asian than other Asians because obviously kindergarten is the first time I was like really conscious of my classroom setting. There were a lot of other Asians in my class and they were all Chinese American. So pretty much people would always ask me if I was Chinese and I would have to tell them, no, I'm Vietnamese. And at that age, no one knew what Vietnam was. So I would basically have to tell everyone that Vietnam is a different country besides China, and at that age I didn't even have any concept of really what a country was, but I always told people that it had something to do with the Vietnam War because I knew that my parents were refugees and that's why they came here, but it was all very confusing for me, and all I knew was that all these other Asians were all Chinese and they were all different from me. So aside from realizing that, I really didn't have to deal with that many other times where I realized that I was different from people up until like high school. And in high school is when I really started to realize that I was Asian and that's different from being white. Growing up in the town that I did, all of these kids around me from kindergarten to high school, they had all been my friends, so I felt like they didn't treat me differently for being Asian. However, in high school when I was thinking about my future, I was talking to my mom and I said I wanted to be an English teacher. And my mom taught in schools before, and she kind of discouraged me from being an English teacher because she said that the students that I taught would tell me that my English was poor because I was Asian. So back to the point of my differentiating between being Vietnamese or any other type of Asian, this was something that I struggled with for a long time because all throughout high school I found that I couldn't identify with the Chinese kids because they always went to like Chinese family parties or Chinese school or Chinese dance that was like really popular for all the cool Asians, but I wasn't a part of any of that. So growing up I didn't have any other Vietnamese friends, so I was pretty isolated. A lot of Asian Americans talk about how they can't identify as either Asian or American, but I couldn't really identify as Asian American or Asian American because all of the Asian Americans that were surrounding me were Chinese American and I didn't have really any kind of voice in that community. However, I do think that this played a lot into the person that I am today because it basically allowed me to form a complete personality without having to do with my race or ethnicity at all. So I basically focused all of my attention into my athletics, which at the time was running track. I kind of just built my community around that rather than through my cultural relationships with other people in my school. Fast forward into college. College was the first time that I really had exposure to other Vietnamese American friends, and it was definitely the first time in my life that I was like, wow, this is cool, like you know my food, you know my language. However, at this point in my life, I had already developed such a strong sense of self, like without the Vietnamese American attached to it, that I actually found that I had not that much in common with any of these Vietnamese Americans because all of these people too had grown up with other Vietnamese Americans in Vietnamese communities, and I just found that the aspects of my personality that were the strongest were the ones that I developed free from race. But other than that, I had a really good experience growing up. I really wasn't really bullied by white people for being Asian until actually college, which I think is really weird. So when I was 18, I was bullied for being Asian, and I feel like that's pretty weird. Into my adulthood, I noticed my being Asian a lot more. Maybe it's because in the world that we live in now, people are kind of more racist. I don't know. The next question is, were you always proud of your heritage, or was there a time that you rejected it? So during those early years when everyone was asking me if I was Chinese, I thought it would be really convenient to just be Chinese, because then I wouldn't have to explain to everyone what being Vietnamese is all about. I also feel like my family kind of pushed on me to kind of reject the Vietnamese side of things, specifically because with Vietnam, at the end of the Vietnam War, my parents and a bunch of other people had to leave the country because if they didn't, they would literally be killed. So for a lot of Vietnamese Americans, the Vietnam that exists today is not the same Vietnam that it was back then. The country was split in two, and there was like communists and non-communists. People often say it's like North and South, but it's not quite as obvious as North and South because there were non-communists in both, and the people from one had to flee to the other to be safe from the communists, basically. So anyway, my family is non-communist, so they had to leave at the end of the war and then basically never come back. So from an early age, they weren't really trying to force being Vietnamese onto me. Like, we did speak Vietnamese in the house when I was young, but as I grew up, we just spoke English in the house. However, probably around 3rd grade or so, or whenever my brain was starting to develop into like an independent, consciously thinking human being, I was really proud that my parents were refugees, and I was really proud of the way that they came to this country, that they survived, that they literally came here dirt poor, couldn't even like enter the country, had to like work in these terrible jobs, didn't speak the language, and they just did whatever they could to build the life that they have now. And it was something that I was like so proud of. The majority of my Chinese American friends kind of just came here because their families had money and could just move here and like give them this life, whereas my parents literally had nothing and were able to still give me the same kind of upbringing. And I honestly am just so proud of my heritage now. What are some stereotypes that you struggle with? So this question is kind of funny, I think, because I just think stereotypes are like so funny. Like, sometimes they're rooted in truth. Obviously, that's like how they come to be, because people just make these observations and then say that it's true about a whole slew of people, which is obviously not true. But number one is everyone thinking that I'm Chinese, or that all Asians are Chinese. It's my pet peeve now. It's literally like people know that if they want to make me mad, just call me Chinese, or like try to speak Chinese to me. And I know that for a lot of people it's difficult to be able to tell different types of Asians, but I also kind of think that, you know, people my age should definitely be able to tell the difference now, at least between East Asians and Southeast Asians. Like, at this point, you should know that like China and Korea and Japan, those are like East Asia, and that Southeast Asia is like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, whatever, Thailand, but not everyone knows that. But I just think it's kind of funny, even though it does really annoy me, so please don't ever call me Chinese. I also do get like a ton of comments on one of my videos. It's like the only video that anyone ever watches, but the video is about living in New Zealand, and so everyone's just like, we don't want you in New Zealand, go back to China, blah blah blah. And I'm just like, I literally say in this video that I'm Vietnamese, but okay. So the second big stereotype that I have to deal with is everyone thinking that I'm good at math. I decided that I wanted to study math in uni because I was so bad at it. In high school, you know, Asians are stereotypically supposed to be like good at math and science. In my high school, I was placed into honors, and in honors I like got C's and D's and F's, and then I overrode again into honors, even though they were like suggesting that I go down a level. I just like wanted to be in honors because all the other kids were in honors that I felt like I should be with. I just kept getting F's, and then there was one time that I got like a 30 or something, and I just started crying, and I was just like, why am I in this class? And then I dropped down a level and I realized, I was like, wow, actually I understand all of this. Like, it's not that I'm bad at math, it's just like I was in the wrong level basically. And then I realized that like it was so cool to be a math teacher, and I just was like, I just want to be a math teacher because I want to show kids that it's not that they're bad at math, it's just like the way people are teaching them or the level that they're at, etc. So basically it was like because I was bad at math that I decided that I wanted to study math, to be able to prove to people that even if you're bad at something, you can keep persevering and you can do better. So anyway, in university, I'm a math major, or I was a math major. I've graduated now, but the first thing that you ask someone when you meet them is like, oh, so what's your major? And I literally would just lie about my major. I would say I'm like communications or nursing or something, because I would never want to tell people that I was a math major because, well, one, I kind of was like, yeah, I don't want to like be stereotypical Asian, and then two, I didn't want to be made fun of for actually being bad at math. So if I tell people that I'm a math major, they're always like, oh, classic. And I'm just like, what does that mean? Number 3 is yellow fever. It's the idea that I'm exotic and fun. Well, I am exotic and fun, but not because I'm Vietnamese or Asian. But yeah, all these guys are like, oh, you Vietnamese goddess, you blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, okay. There are definitely certain types of stereotypes about what Asian girls should be like as a romantic partner, but I'm definitely not any of those stereotypes, and I feel like it's pretty obvious once you meet me that I'm not submissive. The next question is, can you speak your language? I can speak my language probably at like a 3rd grader's level. So basically, it was my first language, and then I only use it to communicate within a domestic household setting. So all of the phrases I can say have to do with activities or food. So I can say like, I'm gonna go to school, or can I get a sandwich? But I did go to Vietnam for the first time last year, and I was able to communicate more or less enough. Next question is, how has being Asian American affected your relationship with your parents? Growing up, my mom was like a pretty stereotypical tiger mom, but I also was raised Catholic Christian, and then she switched and she became Buddhist, and then the Buddhism really affected a lot of my upbringing, really shaped the way I think and look at the world now. So that was a big part of it. And then also during that switch, she kind of switched too and became less of a tiger mom. That tiger momness was probably necessary as a kid, because I think when I was younger, I was kind of like a brat, but she kind of like disciplined me enough so that I didn't become like a brat in my adulthood. I think if she had kept being really strict, I would have become really rebellious, and that would have like ruined our relationship, but she kind of became more understanding and lax, which is kind of part of the Buddhist philosophy, is like not being so uptight about things. So question number 8 is, how do you feel about your heritage now, and do you identify with it? I 100% absolutely identify with my culture. I am so proud of being Vietnamese, especially now that I visited Vietnam for the first time last year. I finally feel like I'm not like a poser anymore, like I actually am Vietnamese American. It plays a huge role in my identity today and in my personality, and I think that if you take away my being Vietnamese, I would be a completely different person. And the last question is, what is your favorite thing about your heritage / what is your favorite thing about being Asian American? I think that specifically being Vietnamese American, I'm more cultured, because in my experience, I was the only person that was Vietnamese, so I did have this whole Vietnamese culture surrounding my family life, but then because I was the only one in my whole town, I had to learn about all these other cultures. So I learned a lot about American culture, obviously, like all other Asian Americans, but then I also learned about Chinese culture from my Chinese friends, and Indian culture from my Indian friends, Brazilian culture, etc. All the other friends that I've had. I really was able to be exposed to all those things because I was forced to, because I didn't have anyone to relate to. But yeah, I am very happy of my heritage and being Asian American, and I just feel so blessed to have been part of the family that I was part of, or that I am a part of. So yeah, if you want to see more videos like this or more videos from me, please just subscribe to me as well. I'd really appreciate that, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!